Okay, so now we're going to take a look at how to optimize Ableton Live for your own personal setup. In order to do that, we need to go to the Preferences tab, which you can find up here under Live and Preferences. And this now opens up the Preferences tab. And within this Preferences tab, you can see over here, we have various tabs that you can click on: Look, Feel, Audio, Link, MIDI, File, Folder, Library, Plugins, Record, Warp, Launch, and Licenses Maintenance. So let's take a look at each of these. First of all, we have Look and Feel. Now, I would just leave everything as it is for now. The only things I would suggest that you take a look at are Zoom Display. This is good depending on how big or small your display is. If you're on a small laptop, for instance, you might want to take this down just to give yourself some more screen real estate. If you have a really large screen and you want things to be big, if you just push that out, you can see that changes the relations of each of these parts of the Ableton Live interface. And if you click on this little arrow right here, it'll go back to 100%. And the other thing you might want to take a look at right here is colors. And this is the way I have mine set up. The theme is dark. I'll show you, for instance, if I go on light, it changes how it looks. This is mid-light, the default setting, mid-dark, and I like mine to be dark. I just find it easier on my eyes when I'm working. You can see the difference. This is pretty extreme, and I'm in a small dark studio, so that really affects my eyesight. So I find this to be nice. I have my brightness on 92. I can show you how this affects. This setting affects how things look. So let me just put it back up to where it was. 92 roughly, there we go. And you also have color intensity. I like mine to be on 0. So that's the general look and feel of things. This is probably the most important tab right here, your audio tab. Now, if you don't have a sound card, you're probably going to go here on Core Audio. And here you'll probably, this is your input device, you'll probably go onto the built-in microphone if you have one on your computer. And the output device, you would probably go on to the built-in output, which would be your computer speakers. Now, I have a sound card. Mine's called a Fireface UC Mac. And as you can see, I have it on there. I've got various ins and outs, which I'll go into in a moment. And I also have my output device set on that. Now, here you need to go to, if you have a sound card, that is, you need to go to Channel Configuration. And then go to Input Configuration. This is basically your inputs on your sound card. So say, for instance, if you're plugging your guitar in, a microphone or whatever, and you have two types of inputs. You have mono inputs and stereo inputs. And let me just read what it says up here because it is pretty important. Choose which audio hardware inputs to make available to Live's tracks. That means when you have them selected here, they become activated. Every input pair can be used as one stereo in and or two mono ins. So you can basically have stereo or mono inputs. Deactivating inputs reduces the CPU load. So I could, if in theory, activate all of these and all of these, but that will increase my CPU load, which you can see up here. It's nice and low right now. But if I was to activate everything, basically that switches everything on, and Ableton is having to work a lot more than it needs to, because I only have inputs right now on 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So you want to keep these as low as possible just to free up CPU for, more important things. So let me just go out of that. And the output configuration is basically what is going out of your sound card. And for me, that means my monitor speakers, which I have selected right here. And let's take a look. What else do we have? This I would just leave as it is right now. Then we come to latency, which can be pretty important depending on how old or new your computer is. Latency is when I hit a key on my USB keyboard, for instance, and the sound comes out in a delayed fashion. So if I hit it like this, and then it comes out like this, dude, like a second later, that has to do with latency. The same also goes for mics or guitars or whatever you have plugged into your sound card. So the higher the latency, basically the more delayed the signal is, and the lower the latency, the more direct it is whenever you hit a key on your keyboard or you speak into your mic. And this really is dependent on how your own computer is set up. And if you're having latency issues where you find that things aren't working out as well, you can go in here and try either lower latencies or higher latencies. The lower latencies that you choose, the more it is going to possibly start making like glitchy sounds because it's more work for the computer. And the higher you go, usually the more latency there is. So if you're having difficulty finding out exactly where you want to place the latency, buffer size that is, if I were you, I'd just contact Ableton support and get them to help you out because that's something that really depends on the way your system is set up. So next we have link and MIDI, and here this basically has to do with the control surfaces that you have. So say for instance you have a MIDI keyboard. As you can see here, I have my Ableton PUSH. I also have what's known as a Novation launch control, and this can be a little complex to set up. And again, I can't just generalize because it all depends on what USB controllers you have set up. The best thing that I've usually found is that if you, say for instance, you buy a Novation launch control, if you go on the website, it will show you how to set it up with Ableton Live. And the same goes for usually any other types of controllers that you can purchase. On the websites of the companies themselves, they will show you exactly what you need to switch on and off in this preferences tab right here. Then we'll go into the file and folder tab. Here I would just leave everything as it is for the moment. The library tab I would also just leave as it is for the moment. Plugins I'd also leave as it is in the default mode. If your computer has plugins that you haven't found, you can just hit the rescan button right there, or you can also set the folders where the plugins are located by hitting these browse buttons. But usually Ableton does a good job of finding this stuff automatically. Also here in the record, warp and launch tab, I would just leave everything as it is in default mode. And then the bottom tab right here is the licenses and maintenances. This is where you would go to authorize your version if you have bought it. And you can switch on automatic updates if you like. And that's it. So I hope that helps, and let's move on to the next video.